Thank you so much. And now to Cecilia.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity for us to be here. I think just to give background, research is usually we have a World 1 problem and a World 2 problem. And usually students come to us with a World 1 problem that they experience in the workplace. But the moment you start to do your master's or your doctorate degree, you have to also focus on a World 2 problem, which is now an academic contribution. And to start off with, Patience, welcome. He's all the way from Harare, so we are honored to have you here. Just to give you a small introductory, the topic of his study is the impact of organizational culture on employing creativity and innovation in two Zimbabwean manufacturing companies. So I don't want to steal your floor, so you're more than welcome to start with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Prof. She's quite a diligent supervisor. Each time I send staff, she immediately responds within about 48 hours with critical, input. And I want to thank Da Vinci for affording me this opportunity. I want to thank all you members for coming to listen to me. I'm going to learn as well from your questions and your inputs. So I don't claim to know it all, but I'm here to learn as well. It's an interactive process. If I knew everything, I wouldn't be studying. I would just pluck the PhD from the mountain or something. So basically, the background, I think, like Prof said, is impact. The title is Impact of Organizational Culture on Employee Creativity and Innovation in Zimbabwean Manufacturing Companies. So the background of the study is look after there was the global financial crisis in 2007-2008, and we were already under sanctions and political turmoil, and companies were closing. And there's massive unemployment. Right now it's sitting at about 95%. So you have graduates selling airtime, doing menial jobs. We used to laugh at Nigeria to say, if you go to a terminal, you find a master's guy sweeping the terminals. So it also homed in on Zimbabwe. So basically, there is a bias that I'm an HR manager in one of the companies I'm studying. So there's a good chance I can also be unemployed. And then what we're trying to stem on the benefits of the study will be like saved jobs. You avoid prostitution, destitution, crime, drug abuse. We are looking at 300 employees. We have got 10 dependents each. So there's a multiplier effect of poverty. If those 300 employees lose their jobs, those 3,000 people will be affected. So what we are trying to say is, from the literature, you have Procter & Gamble, you have IBM, they went near death, experience, but Low Gestina, through culture changed. So that also sent a spark in my mind to say, if other companies can innovate, Apple, they almost went under when they fired Jobs. He came back, he was more focused on finance, including the technological side. And they met every Monday to discuss innovation. So that culture. So I'm saying, if these Zimbabwean companies, one is a paint company, which I used to work for as well, which is in the private sector. I'm in the public sector. It's private, but we are supported heavily by government. So I would want also to have a look at the differences in the cultures in these companies, and the way they are run, and then the way they innovate, and then what can be done. So the specific problem is, which the study intends to address, is the apparent lack of a robust organizational culture which could enhance creativity and innovation to increase business sustainability of selected manufacturing companies. Right, so how can selected Zimbabwean companies benefit from changing their business culture to enhance employee creativity and innovation, to mitigate the effects of lack of foreign currency and working capital? So like I said, there was a global financial crisis. We're under sanctions. After the 2013 elections, the global political agreement which had brought in Morgan the late, things had stabilized for 5 years. But then they went belly up again in terms of the macroeconomic factors, right? There's no working capital, there's no GDP is actually going down, and then you have no working capital. Of course, there was deflation. Again, you can't get into a business where you don't get something. Inflation must be stable, but deflation, those who have done business, is also not a very good animal to have around. So, where I'm coming from is from a buyer's point of view is where I see the culture, like in where I work. It was like where a government company will never get broke, but the government is broke. Therefore, necessarily, you also get broke. So that culture did not sit well with me. But then I was saying, this is an informal. I want to go in and put in a survey, but you can't really do culture change in depth using a survey. But it gives you a snapshot of the current culture, right? A dipstick shot to say, is it weak? Is it strong? So that one can be done, which sends me into my research philosophy or epistemology to say it's mixed. I'll use the mixed method research where I use quantitative, which comes from the positivist school of thought, which says there is verifiable, verifiable factual data out there, which you can collect. But we are saying it's not good enough, to study culture using just a survey. Yes, you see it's weak here or it's strong there, so what? So the other side, the qualitative way, we are saying the interpretivist or constructivist, where we are saying people can create their reality. In other words, there is tacit knowledge resident in the workers or other stakeholders, which we can tap into and change the culture, increase creativity, increase innovation, and then make sure the companies don't go under, so the company sustainability is achieved. In other words, the company is a going concern, people have jobs, they send their children to school, they send monies to their folks in the rural areas. So the community benefits, even the fiscus benefits, because if the company is there, it pays corporate taxes. If individuals are employed, they pay individual taxes, pay as you earn. And then, like I said earlier, when you avoid poverty, you avoid destitution, and you avoid people pouring into South Africa. Here, we will come and take your jobs, guys. We don't like to do that. We want to stay there. So that's the other big picture. And where I come from is manufacturing, where we manufacture, manufacturing entity, where we manufacture transformers. Right now, we have got a lot of households that have not been energized electricity-wise because there are no transformers. So the standard of life will also go up if the culture in our company changes and we don't depend on government handouts. We will be innovative, like I gave the example of in my literature, IBM features, because literature we don't just regurgitate literature, review, dump it into your research. Well, I want to link it. Why am I quoting IBM? They went through a near-death experience. Therefore, if they came out, I think right now they're okay. So if they came out of that near-death trap, it means there's a possibility we can also get out. But how do we do it? That's the essence of the research. Like my sister was saying, to say you must have an answer for. So the problem is, how can we create a culture that will inculcate values of creativity and innovation? And right now, let's see, this is structured. I want to talk off the cuff. And let's see. Right. So I've talked about my epistemology, my ontology, my bias. Personal bias is, like I said, I'm also interested in not losing my job. And I'm also
Strong bias.
Yes. And I'm also interested in honing my research skills. The professor is here, she helps me. We help each other, we talk. So let's say I lose the job. I can be a consultant, I can do research. And riding on my PhD, suppose I pass, and all the advice I get, I can do a good job out there, doing some research. And so that's another bias from my side. And I'm also a disciple of, statistical analysis, having done a master's, used the statistics in my analysis. And I'm also a disciple of the rich data, like Prof was saying, to say qualitative interviews will give you rich data, or raw data, in fact, original data. Like, in a learning organization, Peter Senge talks of a learning organization. People must learn and create their future. So that's the other bias, to say there is resident knowledge there, which you must tap into, tacit knowledge, like Nonaka and Takeuchi. Those Japanese guys, they talk of socialization, they talk of information which is tacit, which must come to the fore, it's embedded in people, and then they think outside the box as well. The 9-dot problem, right? We've all heard of the 9-dot problem, where people cannot stick out and they write boxes and then they get stuck in the box. In order for you to link them up, it comes like a kite or something. Start from the bottommost dot, then you go across, you come there, you get out of the boxes. That's thinking outside the box. Then you go again and then you think outside the box. So that's the thrust to say, instead of whining and pining about government or shareholders not pouring in money, what can people do? Like at Astra Paints, the other company I'm studying, they've already come up with an innovative idea of making waterproof paint without using oil, using water, but then they make it something which is waterproof. So someone played around, thought outside the box, played around with the chemicals and the combinations, and then it reduces the amount of money they are going to use to buy cotton seed. And cotton seed is highly flammable. It reduces accidents of fire or occurrence of fire. So you can pass on that to the consumer or to the employees, they earn more. And then, so that was on my ontology. Epistemology, I think I've covered positivism and interpretivism. Yeah, the 9 dots, yeah. So you see the 9 dots, I think most of you. Prof, when he was in Zimbabwe last one, on Friday, he asked the people, I think very few, there was 2 of us who had counted the 9 dot problem. So to say it helps people to think outside the box and to be creative and to be innovative. So my research questions, of course, they are still tentative until it's submitted. So how does organizational culture impact employee creativity and organization innovation? And how can employees contribute to organizational innovation? This is from my research protocol, which I got input as well from my supervisor. It's a question I'm asking on the interviews. And I'm getting a lot of rich original data on how companies can be innovative, what individuals can do, what the companies themselves can do. It's a 10 question questionnaire, the interview protocol. I think people ask me about the trustworthiness of the data. So this is my my guide. Of course, I can then probe more or expand more, because I think qualitative data is recursive. You can also refine. If someone doesn't really understand the question, I think I can then explain. So the third question is, what factors affect employee creativity? And then how can the organization tap into open innovation systems, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing of ideas, which is also a cheap methodology of getting ideas. For instance, I think there's a company, a petrochemical company, which did not know how to separate oil and water once they had frozen together. They could separate it when both substances were liquid form. So they put it on their portal or WhatsApp or internet portal where there's this group, right? So the best solution came from a guy in nanotechnology, and it was scot-free. So where I'm coming from is, how can also Zimbabwean companies, these understudy, benefit from? So I'm getting answers like, let's team up with tertiary institutions, let's team up with suppliers, let's team up with technocrats. Then we create a portal like a Zend portal or an Astra portal, where if like our transformer workers have told us in our employee engagement surveys, that is over-designed. There's too much material coming in there, therefore it's making it costly, therefore we're not competitive. So the other part of the background is you've got cheap imports from China, India, which are killing our business, right? So, but we are saying Zimbabwe is open for business. So if we don't get protection through the tender system, we can go under. So you see, there's a massive problem there. So as of now, at Zend, we've introduced product development meeting once a month. And we've introduced the creativity forums like email, suggestion boxes, and even people walking in to tell us what they think. And from the product development meetings so far, we have had about 3 very innovative initiatives coming from the employees, the engineers. Like they have a prototype which they have designed of the transformer, which takes out a lot of material getting in, but without compromising its performance on the grid. So that will help us in terms of reducing the cost. And we've also introduced a culture change program on the 19th of June, right? So we are now looking at, we did a baseline to say on 20 items, innovation, creativity, bureaucracy, teamwork, where are we? So we got poor marks, like 40%. Now I want to do the second and do a dependent t-test to say, has there been a change in terms of culture change? People are meeting, communicating, suggesting. So, but basically what we are saying is all these are just tentative ways where we are introducing, but we have to get the data from the people and then probably come up with a model or a grounded theory from the qualitative side. Where in our Shona culture, we have what we call Nimbe. Those from Kenya would know Harambe or Ujamaa, where they were cooperatives. But in the Shona culture, these are not permanent cooperatives. What happens is, the Nimbe concept, doctor would know it, people come together during the summer season to plow. Let's say we have 20 villagers. So in a week's time, they will have plowed all the fields for the 20 villagers. So what does it do? It reduces the lead time to plow. So you quickly plant. During the weeding period, they come together again. Today they are at my place. They weed all the fields. Maybe there are 5. You have got 5 acres or 2 acres. In 2-3 days they are done. So you do that for the whole village. And then the aim is to have food security. And you have innovative ways of doing. Some will be cultivating, some will be hoeing, something like that. So and the answers I'm getting so far from the interviews is from the qualitative side. They are saying the Nimbe concept killed the silo concept, which the silo mentality is killing big organizations, right? And if you go back to IBM, even GE, Jack Welch, their former, the legendary Jack Welch, he was a hater of bureaucracy, cutting through reams of bureaucracy. An idea takes forever. There was one company in the literature where they were a cotton ginning company. You have to weave a 100-meter kind of cloth. But on the 50-meter mark, the machine would break down and repair it at a huge cost in terms of time, lead time, in terms of the maintenance. A new MD came in. He just went to the people and said, can you suggest ways of making sure that this machine doesn't break down on the 50-meter mark? So one guy from the shop floor came with an idea, and they implemented it, and then the machine would go 100 meters without any problem. They asked him the question, for how long did you hold this idea? He said, for the last 37 years. So from the literature, you can see there is a lot of information on the shop floor, which is going untapped in most companies. So that's where I'm coming from in my research to say, these guys on the ground, they know they have solutions. Like one guy who told us that our transformer was over-designed was from the shop floor. And the engineers were then challenged, and then they're coming up with these ideas. If you take this and that, it's redundant. But if you look at the modern cars, when we grew up, cars had blade of pipes, wires. But the modern car is quite compact, and you can diagnose problems using a computer. So what happened? But they are still proficient, even if not more proficient. So if you look at from the literature, the iPod, it went into the iPhone, into the iPad. Continuous improvement. So innovation does not mean massive technological advances. Even systems can be innovated. If systems, you can have product innovations, like iPod is a very good one. If you look at, say, the music industry, with those long playing records, with tapes, with discs, now you can actually download seamlessly online, iTunes. So that's something we are looking at to say, we want to provoke that. And then we reduce dependence, or we don't become crybabies. We compete with the best and benchmark. The other answers that are coming from I've done 12 interviews out of 15 at one company. The other company I still have to do from zero. The other answers that are coming is let's benchmark, like what others have done. And let's give employees an opportunity, like 3M, they give people about 1 day per week to work on a project which is related to the company. Google do that as well. So from the literature, it informs your research to say if it can happen there. And then the gaps also, like I said, literature review, we don't regurgitate. We want to see the gaps in the literature from the raw data I'll be getting, particularly from the qualitative side. To say, can we come up with an Afrocentric informal knowledge, bringing African knowledge into the fore, which has been suppressed, but which is rich and can assist companies. Because we are looking at, like in Zimbabwe, we are looking at the Western model of management, right? There is the Eastern side, people like Auchi and whatever, and you have your Kaizen and whatever. But can't we come up with an African model, of course, which complements, you can't reinvent the wheel, which also complements, which is also in a state of flux, which can, which can adjust in terms of what is obtaining in the particular setup. Because you may have top leadership, they may think they know it all, and then someone said, if you are leading, you must check whether some people are following. And so that explains why you have people with degrees, masters, but their companies are not doing well. Why? So it means, I think like my colleague was saying, the people at the coalface, you can't ignore them. They've got a lot of information to give. And then Peter Senge talks of the fifth discipline as systems theory. So systems theory, I'll also use it, because a theory is used to illuminate certain things, but it cannot illuminate everything. It is also, you can use the metaphor of a theory as a hanger in the closet. You hang certain things, but certain dirty clothes, you can't hang them, you must put them in the washing basket. So the theories, they are not an end in themselves. So I've used Edgar Schein's theory of culture and values. I've used Cameron and Quinn in terms of their competing values framework. And I'll use Denison. And, so these are Western theories. So this is why, from a grounded, I think in our studies at PhD, in our lectures, we exposed to grounded theory to say it will be inductive from the facts on the ground. Can you build a theory in an inductive way, but based on facts we have gleaned from the participants? So that's another aim of the study and a problem I wish to solve or to help, to alleviate, to say, can we have an Afrocentric perspective where we take, informal knowledge in the African setup to complement, not to supplant the Western world, but to complement the Western way of doing things. And so that's the reason why I have a mixed design, to say the positivist, the affect there, snapshot view, then rich data, and then steps to undertake the study. So I've so far distributed the survey questionnaires. I modified them from the current ones in the literature, like the Cameron and Quinn, or it uses yes and no, the ipsative kind of responses. I then adapted that to put in a Likert scale where you put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to make it easy for the participants to. Because if you look at the Cameron and Quinn in its raw form, it's complicated for the shop floor worker. How you then compute, the scores for the questionnaires. So I had to adapt them from ipsative yes no to Likert scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 being strongly disagree, and then 5 being strongly agree with a particular statement. So I will use, and I've already started that, but obviously we are data cleaning in consultation with my supervisor. We are cleaning the data to say, is this the best way we can report this? But for starters, you can see the means to say, if say, the scores, the mean scores per statement are gravitating around 2.5, 3. It's a weak culture, is it way, right? If they are gravitating, the majority of them around 4 is a strong culture. But so what? Then we come up with there. So I've collected 208 questionnaires which are usable and analyzable using the statistical products, service solutions now. We used to call it statistical program for social scientists when we're doing our bachelors. I understand now is statistical product service solutions. Right, but it's still the same thing in terms of the mechanics. So we've done a Cronbach's alpha. Cronbach's alpha is a measure of internal consistency of an instrument to cover the validity and reliability of the instrument. Does it measure what it purports to measure in a consistent manner? So Nanal and Bernstein, they said 0.76 is all right. So 2 of the instruments scored actually 0.8 plus. One scored about 0.6. The creativity one, but for research purposes it would okay in terms of Kaisa, Maya, Olkin, adequacy of the sample. So, but that is work in progress. I still have to work hand in glove with my supervisor to refine that data, and then certain things we may need to put in Excel so that we juxtapose the 2 companies, and then come up with the graphs and other metrics. And then the interviews, I'll do 15. I've done 12 so far for Zesa Enterprises, and do 15 again for Astra Paints and see what comes out from the participants. And then in this case, we are looking at, obviously you can't really randomize we are looking at purposive sampling in terms of what value I can see. So there's some bias there to say, I think from this engineer I can get a lot of what I want. From this supervisor as well, so that you cascade low to the coal face. From this winder, so I've gone as low as the shop for guy who is a winder, who winds, what can be done, how can you be more creative, how can you be more innovative. And then I've also gone to engineers and marketers to get their input into. And a lot of these guys are quoting, let's benchmark, ABB, Apple, Procter & Gamble, 3M. But obviously, you situate it in your particular context. And then, so I think thus far I can stop there. I think I'll get more questions from my supervisor to augment what I've been asking, right? Like, for instance, we can investigate the following questions. Are there significant relationships between employee creativity and innovation using a correlation? But obviously, correlation does not mean causation, but right, weight can be correlated to height, but it doesn't mean the other causes the other. And then, are there demographic differences between the two manufacturing companies with regard to organizational culture, employee creativity, innovation? And in which case, we'll use analysis of variance ANOVA and a t-test of difference as necessary. And then the other one will be, what are the perceptions of staff from the two manufacturing companies with regards to organizational culture, employee creativity, and innovation? So it's very much a work in progress. And then you also want to look at the silo thinking, where is silo thinking? Like I've already said in Zend, they are saying there's so much silo mentality. HR, believe they are HR, finance. So the cross-pollination, those who like Soga, Barcelona, the way they do things, it's like a flowing river, and they damage so many other clubs. So in some companies, you have a guy trying to run the whole length of the pitch, which is impossible. So we want to look at collaboration, engagement, and silo function. So let me rest my case there, so that I also get feedback. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patience.
Thanks, Tsepo.
All right. Rocco?
Okay, Patience. There's some things that have come to my mind, and Africa as a continent is different.
Is what?
Africa as a continent is different
Yes.
to the Western world, the Eastern world, etc. Because our cultures are very, very different to the rest of the world. And where I see Zimbabwe at the moment, it's at its infancy stage now. Everything is like, when we had World War II, everything was just, there was nothing left. And people started all over again, basically. So what one needs to look at, and I think this is something that you need to look at, think about it. I'm saying a lot of your well-to-do and educated people, Zimbabweans, have actually left Zimbabwe. And they're all over the world. And they're doing very, very well. And I think you need to tap into their knowledge and wisdom and their savvy, their tech savvy, what they've got. Because if you can tap into that, add it to what they know about their home culture, the Zimbabwean culture, the African culture, I think you'll go a lot further. The other point you need to look at, you can't start an organization and become a conglomerate like the GE, for example, because you won't get there. It's too big to start. You have to start from the bottom and build it up. It's a small one-man business. You start all over, and you're looking at SME, ME type of setup. Whereas in your agricultural sector, yes, you can go co-op route because the people are all together. They all participate in building that agricultural setup, where they all benefit from it at the end of the day. Because here it is, I'm benefiting and I can actually buy, and from there another group will come up and earn as well. So it works like a spiral in reverse. Okay, so I think you need to look at something like that, but don't take away the culture that you have, and don't implement Eastern or Western culture, because it's not going to work. It's going to fail. You're set to fail, because the people want to do things the way they see fit, the African way. Okay, so I'm saying Africa, but it's the African way.
Thank you very much for that input.
Thanks, Rocco. All right. Oh, yeah.
And we all eager.
Yeah, I know.
I just wanted to take a lead on from Rocco, Patience. There's something called LDT, Learner Directed Training Modules. where the teams that are working on equipment like your winder are responsible for developing best operating practices on those bits of equipment. So generally what you would do in Africa, largely you have old equipment brought in from Europe without the manuals, half the parts missing, and we jury-rig the stuff to start working. So essentially what we found quite useful is that the guys develop their own best operating practice, and your team have already been working on those machines for a long time, and they already have their own shortcuts that they're using. You just need to document them so that you can use them continuously. It's like a Formula One pit crew team. The more you use it and the faster you do it, the more you use it and the more you document it and practice it, the better you become at it. And maybe that's something to consider, LDT model.
Yeah.
Precious, it's just for me, it's just a comment. But I like what you're doing, Sean. We call it in the Eastern Cape Ilima, where people actually they work together, on the cloud. But in terms of the philosophy from the African continent, our own South African, I don't know if you know him, he's actually, I think, was the chairman of Nedbank, came up with the Ubuntu philosophy. He has written a lot of books, Dr. Roel Khoza. So you can look at his philosophy, which actually you mentioned the fifth discipline. Some of his thinking, and he actually took the fifth discipline with the TQM, the Kaizen of the Japanese, to create sort of a management style for the African continent. Obviously, incorporating with other philosophies that already existed, and the thinking and the innate knowledge that we're talking about. Dr. Roel Khoza has actually written a lot around that Ubuntu philosophy, which is applied quite a lot in some South African companies. Obviously, over time, we actually got to lose. But if you can visit his writings, Dr. Roel Khoza, I think he was the chairman of Nedbank or CEO.
He was the chairman.
Yeah, and
also a member of the board.
Yes, there's literature that you can visit in terms of integrating your Western, Eastern to African philosophy.
Thank you very much. And then FNB, did you not work at FNB as well?
Nedbank, Old Mutual, so he actually came during that time. Yeah. So that philosophy was used a lot within Old Mutual and within Nedbank. So if you can visit that literature, then actually that will assist in
Thank you very much. I've put it down here.
All right. Thank you. Tumi?
In fact, you have just spoken about Roel Khoza. Not meaning to blow my trumpet, but actually I worked with him when he was writing the book Let Africa Lead. That's the title for the book. Then he was chairman of ESCOM, and then he moved from ESCOM to the Old Mutual Group, where he also was chairman of Nedbank. So the book is actually called Let Africa Lead. If you can look at it. And then he's also written another book, The Power of Governance. In fact, in our library, we do actually have those books. So that is just an introduction. In terms of your presentation, and I was just trying to think where actually I could place your study. And maybe as a starting position, if I should ask a question this way. Your report, if it had to be taught at a school or at a department, which department would it be? And I'll tell you why. I find that when you're talking about a number of issues. And for me, in an academic study, it is important that you get grounded. You move from economics to engineering to development economics. So I don't know where to place your study. What kind of discipline or disciplines would I place your study?
All right. That's a good question, right? Where I was touching on a number of issues, I think it was the background. To say this is the background where which get me thinking. So where I would situate it is, I would situate it in an innovation and creative department or a learning department, those two. So it's either in the learning, if you come to my brother here, he was talking of learner direct, whatever. So from a learning point of view, where that is inculcated, I looked at the SESI model, where you socialize people as they come. We're already doing that in terms of induction, but I think that's where it ends.
Can I assist you?
Yeah, it's all right, Ma'am. Prof.
The discipline is organizational behavior. Yeah, so mainly organizational behavior with the focus specifically innovation, creativity, and culture.
So you see, two lions can never be escaped by a coup. Thank you very much. Organizational behavior.
Organizational behavior.
And I also come from the HR department. My
which is
background
part
is
of it.
psychology. You see, my
Part
background
of
is.
it.
Okay. Thanks to me.
My question or
Dr. Linda?
comment dovetails into this gentleman's, where I was going to suggest that perhaps you might want to look at the organizational culture of a company like Google, where I believe they're doing some phenomenal things and are therefore able to mine rich information from anywhere from the floor. For instance, a sweeper can walk in and talk to the CEO if they notice something that is happening, and that's a very open organizational culture. The second comment that I would like to make is, I'm not too sure when you're talking about organizational development, should we look at individuals or teams and then discussing this in the context, individuals in the context of a team? I would like some clarity on that, because it looks like you're in one instance with individuals, in another you are with teams. And how are you then going to discuss your findings, which might be problematic?
Can I assist you? Yeah.
Okay. You can come in, Prof.
Just to give some background, this is a PhD. We're not going to change Zimbabwe. Just to clarify our minds, it's a one PhD. He's going to focus on 2 manufacturing companies. He's going to focus mainly on organizational culture, employee creativity, and innovation within those 2 companies. And he's going to do an empirical study only on those 2 companies. So we will look at Google's, but we will only look at it from a literature point of view. He's not going to now interview them. I was in the same, I'm interrupting my own answer now. Yeah, and I think just to clarify, just to come in what you also said, it is a Western instruments, and that's why we decided to conduct interviews as well, and we are going to integrate literature to see how can we holistically now improve the culture, the innovation, the creativity for these manufacturing companies. So that's why the Western and the Eastern is now going to be merged. Yeah. And the one important thing that came out of what you said, and I did a study on the future of HR by using futurists in the Delphi process, and what came out of your interviews is the fact that the answer lies on the floor, shop floor. And which is that is why engagement, and I think what the main essence of the study is to create an awareness through this framework and recommendations to engage more with your subordinates, because management does not have all the answers. So the culture thing is mainly to get to the Google kind of culture. I think that is what the whole study is going to be about.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, if I can expand, like the Prophet said, like the way I talked of the group where we introduced the culture change. This was a board directive, but it happened to kind of dovetail into my study. But the culture change, it actually points to the Google thing, whereby every day, so far we are doing it on a daily basis, whereby every day the shop floor guy has access to a divisional manager who is an engineer or an operations manager who is an engineer. Like she says, from if you look at my background research in detail as well, it talks. I did some, employee satisfaction surveys and engagement surveys, where one of the criticisms when you leave the open-ended question, so what must this company do for you to be satisfied? That's where you get a lot of rich data. You get about 38 different categories or something. One of the things they said was, you managers are ensconced in your offices. You don't know what's happening on the shop floor. You don't even know the number of machines in the plant. So we've killed that to say people go to, of course, the research, sometimes the time of it. So the groups, like, you can take a picture, it's just to show that organizational culture, we've introduced it, and innovation and creativity as part of an organization or systems development thing. But in terms of the research, it becomes, like my brother was saying, it becomes overpopulated all over. So you need to narrow down on individuals. This is for the good of the company, fine. Because like at Astra, they haven't introduced it. But I want to tap into what is it they are doing. And where they when I was at Astra at one time, a consultant came. He called us, I think we were 20 managers. He got 22 versions of the vision, 22 versions of the statement, and various versions of the values. So for starters, we are saying in terms of contributing, practically, but you can't, I think when you were teaching us the theory, you said you cannot solve the whole world's problems. You narrow down, like my brother, what my brother was saying, you need to narrow down. So basically, I'm not looking at the group side of it for the study. That is maybe a feather in the cap in terms of workplace change management kind of. Because I can't put everything there like I was saying. So we leave it out. In terms of delimitation of the study, it's out. But we have introduced it so that we get this type of a sweeper, like my brother was also saying, the call face, linking with the call face in a practical way. But for studies, obviously, we need to delimit,
Okay, cool, thanks. Ray?
I think especially for the presentation. I just want to tap in on your bias, right? You are well invested in this study, right? You are in the middle of this study. And then taking into consideration the 95% unemployment rate, and then that's one of your bias. You don't want to be part of that 95%.
Yeah, to make it 96.
Yes, the 96. And then, so you also, your respondents, your interviews guys, right? How are you going to eliminate that bias so that they won't give you the wrong answers or to suit what you want to find or what you want to solve?
Yeah, in terms of, I think, like our interview protocol, before I settled on the wedding, I also sent it to my supervisor. I think she has got rich, experience. So we crafted the questions in such a way that we take out the bias. For instance, I will say, "Tell me." It's not a leading question. It's an open-ended question. So I'll also not try to lead. Maybe all I can do is to probe if maybe he doesn't understand the question properly, or maybe if he's gone. In fact, there are no right or wrong answers. That's how we get rid of the bias. To say there's no right or wrong answer, but maybe a guy would then justify where he's coming from. Like, for instance, when I said, tell me about how the invent culture concept can enhance employee creativity and innovation in your organization. So we are extrapolating in this way from the African context, like Rob was saying, but modifying it to suit the modern. And the thing that is consistently coming out so far, I haven't really analyzed in depth, but what is consistently coming in is remove silos and they remove over management. Because like in the African culture, the village head, it's not like, a slave driver with a shambok all the time. He's more of a conciliator. There's a problem in terms of fields, demarcations, in terms of someone, impregnating someone's child and then they refuse. You can charge them some cattle and whatever. He's more of like a country club manager who is there who is ruling by exception rather than, by shambok. So the workers are saying we are overmanaged. Yeah, so it's a good point. So that bias, I think the way the interview protocol was framed, because before I took it to the participants, I sent it through to the prof for some guidance as well and assistance.
Okay. And then I'm not sure if I heard correctly, your method or your design is mixed.
Mixed.
And then, so you have two set of results from
yes.
Quantitative and qualitative.
Yes.
So how are you going to plan to bring the whole thing together?
Can I add something to that?
Pardon?
Something that's related to
Yeah.
You have two groups.
Yes.
One you're going to interview, one you're going to do statistical things. How did you select the participant? And how did you select it? And who did you target for the interviews? And the
Yeah.
survey?
Yeah, for Zend, I actually targeted all the permanent employees and you know, those students on attachment. I would call it a census. In which case, in terms of randomization, you are saying everyone has a non-zero probability of getting included, which so that you can extrapolate results from the sample to the population or the generals. You know, so in terms of Zesa Enterprise, actually it was more like a census. Everyone available, I gave them personally, because I was interested in getting a representative sample. So again, we gave everyone, because we had 200 something.
But he's asking the interviews. How did you choose the interview?
Yeah,
the both.
you-
Sorry.
Yeah, so for Astra, I tried as well, but they truncated, you know, they used to be called Astra Pains. Now they're called Astra Pains Plascon. They've been bought by a Plascon company from here. So they chopped off a lot of people. So that census kind of thing was not, but I tried to reach as much of the census as possible. Right, that's for the quantitative. Then for the qualitative, we are using the availability matrix, the purposive, where obviously you can't, in terms of managing the data, conducting the interviews. I'm looking at from a researcher's point of view. I can then say the engineer can give me a lot of information. Why? Because he works with these things, the transformers. The winder, although he's on the shop floor, he does interact with these machines. And the supervisor, he has a way of seeing things which can contribute to innovation and creativity. So I'm looking at the segments from the low level. You kind of segment, but there's no proper random sampling. It's purposive. So again, it's a weakness. You then put it in our weakness. That's a weakness of qualitative research. You then look at purposive. I'm trying to say I'll get a lot of data from the marketing guy. He knows what must be done here. I'll get a lot of data from the engineer. He knows. In paints, I'll look at the chemists. Paint chemists, like already they have discovered that you can make oil paint using water instead of buying oil seed, crush it to make a waterproof paint. So there's a cost saving, right? There's, you know, you can pass on to the consumer and then the company goes on. So yeah, precisely that's a major weakness of even from the literature of a qualitative study. You can't really do random sampling.
Okay. Brilliant. You answered it.
Yeah.
All right. So I was saying to me, yeah, Rocco, I haven't forgotten you. I just have to have.
Give him a chance and I'll ask later.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've noted.
I just wanted to add something into his list.
Oh, okay.
Have a look at Disney World.
Pardon?
Disney World. Yeah.
The Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, how they actually reorganize themselves. It's a very interesting setup. Yeah. I mean, the vice chairman was here.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, you noted. And then Dr.
Your name is Patience, right?
Yeah, Patience.
I must commend you guys from Zimbabwe. You know, you answer interesting names. You know, you guys answer very interesting names.
Yeah.
Men, women. You know, when I hear some people from Zimbabwe, they kind of names the answer. I don't believe it. You know.
You know, we come into the world through the actions of others. Therefore, the names also.
No, I understand that.
That's right, my brother.
Yeah, like, this is the first time I'm seeing a man answering questions.
Yeah.
It's okay. I also think that you're a little bit lucky. You have your guardian angel here with you, so he takes the bullets for you.
I'll put my chocolates later.
Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, we don't normally get students who come here with and they take the bullets and all that stuff, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You're lucky. There is something I want to understand here, you know. I think you quickly jumped into methodology without leading us through the subject matter, you know, like discussing the subject matter and giving us from a literary perspective and ontological perspective of what you mean by innovation and this other stuff that's lined up in the clothing. I didn't get it, you know. I'm sure it is somewhere there. That you and your supervisor know so much about it, but you're not telling it to us here. We are listening to you. Yeah, so it's like you have it amongst yourself. You take it for granted that you have gone through what you are doing as much as you and your supervisor have done, and that is not the case. So I thought you should have actually taken us along and explained certain things to us, the thoughts behind your work, what you have done in your, what is existing in your case study areas. For example, you are talking about innovation from workers. You are trying to get ideas from workers. I think you landed there, if I got you right. I don't know whether you are saying that at this point in time that is not happening in the company you are working in. And these two companies you are going to use as your case study, it looks like you haven't said whether what you are looking for does not exist in these two companies, or it is existing but in a deficient quantity, and how you were able to measure the deficiency. Because in actual fact, what you are trying to say, or what you are trying to tell us, is that you are trying to do something to create efficiency in a situation where there is deficiency. I guess that is what you are trying to do, right? So, but you haven't told us how you arrived at the conclusion of the deficiency, and how you found the deficiency, and how you measure the deficiency, and now how you now began to, how you are going to develop the tools to establish the efficiency.
It's a big conversation.
No,
I'm trying to help you.
No, it's all right. No,
yeah, I'm trying to help you.
it's all right.
Yeah, just take it down. You don't have to answer me, okay?
No, I will have to answer. This is the whole purpose.
You don't have to respond to me, but just...
I mean,
you can deal with it in your...
if you remember, I said I will also learn. In my introductory remarks, I said this will be interactive.
Yeah.
So you are well placed.
I think he still has more.
Yes, and that's right.
So
I don't want him to be apologetic.
no, I'm not apologizing. This is the way it works. This is how it's actually. You don't have to respond. But you have to go and deal with it.
Yeah, precisely. Precisely.
It's not a one, wherever it goes. I've gone through what you're going through. So that you have to like bring them out and explain these things to us. Then the thing is, when you talk about this innovation there, I don't know whether you are talking about innovation, because when you're talking about most of the things you are harping on, you're talking about improvement of mechanical systems, so that operations will be more. Anytime you talk about paint, you refer to paint. These are technological issues. That instead of using oil in a paint, you use water. Now you got better paint. Yeah. So you are harping on technological, scientific issues. So I don't know whether you are going to base this thing you call innovation on technological, industrial, mechanical issues with the manufacturing systems, or you're also going to be dealing with the welfare and the well-being of the workers. Whether the innovation you're talking about is also going to extend to that sector or wherever. Then, if that is the case, it is possible for you to see whether you are going to demonstrate or show whether innovating in improving the well-being of the workers is what the company is looking for, or innovating in asking the workers to contribute opinion in, or getting an opportunity for workers to contribute opinion in how the mechanical and productive systems are going to run. You get that point? Whether you are saying that there was no, this guy you said that had an idea, you made mention of one important thing. This guy that made a suggestion that worked, that took something from 50 meters to 100 meters, which improved efficiency, I suppose. And they asked him, how long have you held this opinion? He said, for 37 years. So it is important for you to, it would have been important for you to ask, why did you hold it for 37 years? It's probably because you were not given an opportunity in an open forum or in a company forum to voice this, to say this. That is where you are going to be saying, okay, it is because you are not innovating. And because you are not innovating, your productivity is going down. And one of the reasons why you are not innovating in this case is because there are a lot of people who have ideas, but there is no open forum for them to contribute to the idea. That is where that statement is going to be relevant. Do you get what I'm saying? So I'm trying to see whether you are going to be talking about the innovation in technological mechanical systems only, or a combination of these and working of other people. You get to articulate it, okay, somehow. That's, again,
maybe so that I don't forget.
No, this thing is recorded.
Oh, all right, fine. All right. It's all right, Doc. It's all right, Doc. It's all right. It's all right.
We spoke again about Afrocentric. The Afrocentric idea.
Yeah.
It is. Let us understand. Let us get this point here. It is good to, when you're talking about organizational culture, I think it was explained here about organizational culture. So the Afrocentric, this culture now is not necessary. I don't know whether it's the culture of mannerisms and way of life or whatever. But the point here is this, of the culture of getting people together to talk. It is different from the ontology of the functionality of science and technology. The science that works here works in Outer Mongolia, it works in Arctic Circle and all this kind of stuff. So the knowledge from a scientific perspective, which is going to work anywhere, respects nature. You get a point. Respects nature. It's not necessarily a way of life kind of a cultural thing. They said, you get a point. So the native, one guy did a PhD thesis on something he called African knowledge in construction. So he demonstrated that Africans actually began to build 1-2-story buildings, 3, sometime before Europeans came. And he went to somewhere in West Africa and took pictures of those construction, and even where they built on top of water. But effort was made to, make sure that those knowledge didn't come out to anybody. So that we will believe that the structural engineering that is used to raise building always came from Europe and America, that kind of stuff. So that we didn't have anything like that. If you go and measure the structure of if you go and measure the structure of those buildings, you see that they complied, exactly with the strength that was required to hold those buildings up on top of the water. So it is still the same dimensional geometric structure and material structure. That's the same thing. And so it's not necessarily new. They obey the law of nature. It's not necessarily an African culture kind of stuff or European culture kind of stuff. If you find it and it obeys the law of nature, it will work anywhere. It doesn't matter who found it.
Right, if I may come in.
Okay, cool.
Right, just
Thank you.
because
just briefly, we've got 3 minutes.
Yeah, briefly. Yeah, he says what is existing. I said from a personal bias, I worked for both companies. I didn't see those structures formally. And then if you look at my questionnaires in terms of the survey, which is the quantitative, I said if you look at some of them, they are hovering around 2.5, which is a weak culture. And then coming to a point where you're saying, is it just product, mechanical, or whatever? My question here says, it's number 7. Tell me how your organization can tap into open innovation systems across the whole value chain. So we are looking at procurement, we are looking at inbound logistics, we are looking at production processes, we are looking at marketing, we are looking at outbound logistics. And I also said systems. It doesn't mean technology. But then with the time we have, I couldn't delve into everything. But here it's there in black and white. It means the whole value chain. Innovation and creativity across the whole value chain. I was giving the architecture, the pillars of the architecture when I looked at mechanical. So to cover his point to say in Mongolia, technology can work in Siberia, we are saying the Afrocentric, it comes to the management style now. That's where it comes. I think I mentioned that people are saying we are over-managed. So that's where it comes in. The technology, anyone can copy it. And then that's where my supervisor comes in to say the engagement. People can copy this Apple, this one is in Zimbabwe, even if we have hyperinflation or whatever. It's there. Of course, it's gone past. So Apple we can copy. But it's the attitude, it's the engagement, it's the management style. Is the totality of the system. I also mentioned the learning culture. I also mentioned the Senge to say the 5th discipline is the system. And the system, like this body system, is all coming from the cortex. But I can do this, it's coming from there. I can do that, it's coming from there. So this is the system. If we could function like a healthy person. Even Professor Hawking was not healthy, but he was functioning. His system was okay. So we are saying we've got a system which we need holistically. Number 7 is very clear. The whole value chain. So I think in this given space of time, I had to look at the highlights of the architecture.
Yeah.
All right.
Brilliant. Thanks. I think it was more a comment. And
no, it's welcome.
Yeah.
We used to debate, so we never get any.
No, you guys will actually add value to one another. Yeah. And then I think there's 2 more. It's you and my youngster there.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Prof, I have 2 questions.
No, I mean not yet, Prof, but we receive. We receive the prophecy.
I have 2 things that I want to agree on, specifically the organizational culture and the organization improvement. So on the organizational culture, it's 2 questions. I think the type of diction and tone that you use for the company is very important, because words of like thinking out of the box, doing this and that, those words actually limit people in how they should think. Companies like Discovery and Investec actually have much more positive diction to us than like resisting the ordinary. When you go in that organization culture, people don't think about boxes. So I'm liking a sense of the good diction that will drive the organization to become good. And then the last one is that how do you show people that the company is improving, right? As Rocco said, that Zimbabwe is in its infant stages, but how do you make sure that your workers actually know that the company is improving and we are doing good? So is it going to be ringing a bell, sending out emails, having master classes, or getting people to engage on what they have discovered in that week? Because I think it's very important to show people that the organization is growing and people are actually benefiting from the organization.
Right, I'll take the last one. I think the first one was more of a comment. I've taken it to use more positive diction. Right, what we are doing, most companies in Zimbabwe, even where I was at Astra, that's why there was that bias, because I had some inside knowledge. We have monthly works councils. Works council is a forum where worker reps, equal number, and management reps meet on a monthly basis to discuss matters of mutual interest. And the first thing you do is, normally they used to bring a shopping list of complaints. Now they are also contributing. So you have a management report, that's how they see ourselves or whatever metrics, the dashboard. I think you talked of the dashboard, my brother. Then we have a production report, we have a finance report, we have an HR report, we have a marketing report, we have the GM, the MD's report, so that they have a global eye view of what the company is doing at any given point, like your pulse. So, and also they come up with suggestions now. So we've kind of empowered. When I joined like my latest company, we had serious industrial relations problem. There was polarity, but we've bridged that gap, whereby we are respecting the worker, we're giving him a voice. I like Da Vinci, they say, if you found your voice. So that's what we are doing. Then at a global level, we have a quarterly where we bring all the divisions. Yeah, so there is a way of them getting to know what's happening.
Okay.
But that's not part of the study.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a fact.
That's not part of the study to improve. He's going to develop a framework at the end and then give that suggestions or recommendations to these companies. But his study is not part of improving it.
Yeah, no, I was just making the reference out of local.
So that's just for interesting sake.
Brilliant. Thank you, my brother. Okay. Yeah.
I would just like to know, is this a comparative study, and why did you choose those 2 companies?
Well, that's like the personal bias one. I don't want to be statistic like Raymond said. 1. 2, also it's very difficult in Zimbabwe. I wanted to study 3. Dulux, which has got some South African interest. You did not want. They kept on saying, come on Friday, we'll phone you, and the phone never comes. So it was a polite way of declining. So the other reason, it was a biased point to say, I can get authority to study. You know, in terms, I was reading a book by Maxwell on qualitative studies. It says you must create relationships with the participants, especially in qualitative. Like you want to study the Eskimos, the Aborigines, they must accept you kind of. You know, people come to Zimbabwe to study the Tonga in Victoria Falls, Kariba area. They build, a hut, then they stay there, then ethnographically taking to see what they do for breakfast, what they do for lunch, in the fields, in the cultural setup. So to be more blunt, because I knew I would get authority to study. And also there are reasonable companies. One was listed on the stock exchange, but when they were bought by the South African partner, they delisted. Then on my side, with the rapport, with the management, I would get authority. So it's very difficult to get authority to start. People are very secretive in Zimbabwe. So that's the reason why I started those two.
Okay. Brilliant. Thanks, Claude. Guys, you still wanna, okay? More benefit goes to you guys.
My question is just how are you going to measure impact on those organizational
We will do multiple regression to see, we'll take the means for the 3 questions, the organizational culture question. The way we do things here, I could have gone into that, but the time frame. What is organizational culture? The way we do things, the values, the systems, all that jazz. So, to be more blunt, we will then take the means for the various questionnaires from the respondents, load them into SPSS. It gives you space for independent variables or variable. It gives you space for dependent variables. Then we look statistically. So far we have seen the R square here, there is 0.04, which is 4%. So we can say for every change in culture metric, percentage change, there can be a 4% change in innovation. But this is still tentative, still data cleaning. But that's what we'll come up with to say. So it gives us the impact. Is there multiple regression is about the relationship, is an extension of what? Correlation. Is there a relationship between independent variables and dependent variables? Statistical, I think these things have been tested. And then to corroborate that, I think like Raymond was saying, that's when we want to come to see from on the ground, from the qualitative. What is the picture? Even the qualitative, you can quantify to say how many people said fish, how many people said the silo must be destroyed, how many people said we must benchmark. So we can try to answer the questions. Sometimes you may not find any meaningful relationships. It's part of science. My master's, I did the burnout, the relationship between burnout and organizational citizenship behavior. I didn't find any burnout, but I found a lot of organizational citizenship behavior. People were running away, like my friend was saying, Zimbabweans have gone all over. So I wanted to see because sometimes a guy would go, would not replace him. He would be given 2-3 jobs. So I wanted to see whether that guy or those guys were not bent out. So the conclusion was Zimbabweans are resilient. There was no significant, of course there was some difference. But there was no significant.
You do have a measure.
Yes. So we do have a measure. Yeah. Albeit it may be weak. Then we comment. There was no significant result we found in this study.
All right. Thanks, Patience. Guys, thank you for your patience. Very, very last one.
Yeah, my sister is speaking for the first time.
In terms of my planning and logistics, you should be there.
Okay, I just wanted to know, out of all the literature you've read, which or who do you think will influence your research most?
The literature I've read, which you like Google, 3M, and then HSBC, because HSBC called all the people, started doing the values, introduced culture change, then measured, and then they saw something happen. I withdrew some money in London from HSBC. I was very much impressed by what I then read this time. That was 2013. So, the best research, no.
HSBC?
Then Econet, I haven't put it in my literature. Econet have introduced mobile money like M-Pesa in Kenya, which has revolutionized life in Zimbabwe, where there's no cash. So I think that one takes the biscuit. All things said and done, home is best. Because they've gone into what we call a value innovation like Maubon and Kim, right? Blue Ocean, where they say, why do you compete for the same number of congregants into your church? Go into a bar where people don't know God, and they collect those and they put in the middle of church, baptize them. So Econet have done that. They've gone into the rural areas, into the towns, and they almost upset the banks, to the point where the banks wanted government to intervene, to say these guys are taking our market share. But we said it's your market share. So they have gone into an area and introduced a product which is called the EcoCash, where I can pay a guy who was touching my kitchen in Bohera in my rural area via EcoCash. My mother phones me, the guy has finished the job, he needs his money. So that one takes the biscuit to the Econet innovation.
All right. Thank you, all of the best, and thank you, Cecilia, for coming.